This week's topic is going to be getting started in an intro to this new HyperWorks interface. So a lot of you may be used to or have worked with HyperMesh Classic in the past. This is our new interface. It's developed to be a lot more intuitive than the classic interface, have some better workflows, and also just easier for people to learn. So if you have new employees that you want to ramp up, it's easier for them to get started, and this looks more like a modern interface. So when you first want to go to HyperWorks to open this up, if you're using Windows, you can just type in HyperWorks. Depending on the version, you may see HyperWorks X, but in the newer, most recent versions, it is HyperWorks, and I'm going to be using version 2021.2 today. When you first open up, you'll see this splash screen getting started. I'd actually recommend going in and looking at what's available here. So it'll take you to this nice page. There's just a handful of videos to get you started with the basics. So you'll be able to play these. There's audio to walk you through the different models. I would say all of them are less than 10 minutes and most of them are less than 5. So a really great way here if you just want to learn quickly how to mesh some 2D mesh or how to use the view controls. All right, so I'm going to take a quick moment here and go ahead and mute everyone. I just hear a little bit of background noise. Right, so the first thing that you'll probably notice is there are ribbons up here. So all of the tools are nicely grouped. If you want to make or edit geometry, you go to the geometry ribbon. If you want to mesh something, you can come to this mesh ribbon. And for things like analysis, you can set up loads and boundary conditions. Something that's interesting here and maybe not obvious is that all of these are multi-click icons, or most of them are. So if you hover over one part of the icon, you'll see apply moments. If you apply over a different part, you'll see apply forces. So just something to note so you don't blindly click on something and it ends up being unexpected. So I'm going to go ahead, open the first or the only model. We only have 15 minutes, so let's open this model. And I'm also going to open my checklist on the side here to make sure I cover everything that I want to get. So you'll have this model browser. It should be very familiar to you. When you select something here, it'll highlight in orange. You also have different options here when you right click. So you can right click, edit, you can do some of these hide or other operations, but you still have this very traditional to HyperWorks turn on mesh and turn on geometry visualization still. You'll notice when you click on this, depending on what view you're in, so if you're just in the model browser here, by default, you don't see these dropping down. So if you want to change that, I know people have different preferences. I'm going to quickly show that you can come in here. The setting to do that is show entities in model and subsystem browsers. Hopefully reduces a lot of frustration if you do prefer this method. From here in any component, you can right click, create different properties, and it automatically assigns them to that component. So in this case, we've applied a P shell to the component. We can come in here and expand these as we want to look at them. But there's also these different browsers that are available. So we can come here and see these different browsers. You'll have something specific to components where you can look at for each individual component at a glance, things like the material, the mass, if we actually had properties in here, and so forth. So we can also look at other different browsers. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, if you are really married to the panels, you love them and you can't believe we're taking them away. I don't think that's a very common sentiment, but there are still the panels that you can bring up when you go to that view panels, and you can work in HyperMesh as you always have. So a quick note here that the new tools are going to show up here. We're not going to create new panels. So any new tools you will go through the browser. If you're having trouble finding something, you know what the tool's called and you just want to know where it's located, you can always use the search icon here and say something like 2D auto mesh, and it'll take you to this mid-surfacing tool. To get out of any tool that you're in, you can right click and swipe over to get out of it. Other things we want to mention, HyperMesh historically has always been a two-handed tool. The mouse controls by default have changed. So zoom in and out is going to be that middle scroll wheel. Pan is going to be right mouse button, and then you will rotate the model by clicking with the middle mouse button, and that will be your rotation point wherever on the model you click. By default, this is one-handed. You can drink your coffee with your one hand and use HyperMesh with the other. As far as selection, by default, when you're not in any tool at all, you can actually go in and select things. So if I select this component, you'll see right now I'm in the component selector. I can drop down here to different things that are in my model, or I can hit a letter. So E for element, and that's going to select all of the elements that were in that component. So certainly you can still come in here and do select. If you want to do multi-select, you can hold down Control, just like you would in a lot of other programs. And then from here, you can edit these elements, duplicate them, and so forth. And we have a few minutes left. Like I said, I'm going to try and keep this to 15 minutes, but we do have some time here. So I'll talk about some of the new and easy to use geometry editing functions. So if I right click on this component and let's say I copy it and then paste, I get a new component, and just to separate them out, let's move this one over. And we'll change the color. Let's make it purple. So we'll hide the old one and just talk about how we might go about doing some geometry editing. And just so it's clear, I will delete off these elements, so we're just starting from geometry. So midge surfacing is an application or an operation on geometry. So I'll just go over here to midge surfaces. By default, you'll see we're highlighted in blue here for automatic. We'll select the solids and we'll say midge surface. All right. This is what the midge surface comes out as. Certainly there are some issues here. So in HyperMesh, perhaps we already know this, but these red lines means that we have free edges. They're not connected to anything. What we really want in this model is for these surfaces to be connected as part of this structure. The easiest thing to fix here is going to be this little sliver. We can just stitch this up. So now we can click and drag. We can suppress lines within this same tool by just selecting this dotted line back here. And now this line will be suppressed, meaning the mesh is not going to, the meshing tool is not going to consider this as a mesh line when it goes in and finally makes the mesh. We also want to do this. Of course, there's always more than one way to skin a cat. So let's talk about a couple of the different tools we can use. One of these is the extend tool. You select a line on a surface to extend, and then in order for this to stop at this new line, we'll want to make sure this auto trim intersecting surfaces is turned on, and we'll just click and drag over here. It will automatically stop and connect to this surface. We'll do the same thing over here. And this last guy. And you'll notice that it nicely attaches itself to the surrounding surfaces. And maybe I don't want these lines built in, so I'll go in, and I don't want to see them in the final mesh, so I'll go in and suppress them. This is the basics of the 2D cleanup. A lot of these tools or all of these tools will also work on surfaces that make up a 3D solid if you prefer that approach when you're editing solids. One more thing here that I just wanted to show, this piece is not missing from the solid, but maybe we want to do a small design change where we extend out this surface. There's different ways to go about doing that. We can Control Select to select these lines, have this extend along this guide, and HyperMesh will automatically extend out this surface. We can just click again to select. And again, maybe I want to not have that feature line in my mesh. It does look like I've got some surfaces that need to be restitched together. So we can also select surfaces. We don't have to do it just based on lines. And we can get these. So now everything is connected, and we've also made some minor geometry modifications. That's all that I'm going to be showing today. Again, there are resources if there's a quick operation that you want to do. There's also built-in icons here to kind of give you a guide into how to use this. So some of these more involved options, there's a drop-down hamburger icon here where you can use some of those more advanced settings. There's also a video icon here to give you an idea of what this tool does and how to go about using some of it.